All right. Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen. This is David Patrick Harry with Church of the Eternal Logos. And tonight, we have a very special stream sponsored by one of our good brothers here in the community. Shout out to Justin M. Justin sponsored tonight's stream, in which he asked me to read this book right here, Man and Technics, A Contribution to a Philosophy of Life by Oswald Spengler. And so this is going to be getting into a lot of interesting territory. Oswald Spengler can be a bit of a controversial figure. He's most noted, and we'll go a little bit over his bio here in a few, for this 2-volume series on the decline of the West. The decline of the West. It is a sort of monumental book in regard to the encapsulation of Western civilization. Really, he was a famous historian, a German academic, sort of straddling the two eras between the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th century. And so this book, The Decline of the West, these 2-volume series, really talks about what he believed to be how civilizations move through, or what he would consider cultures, move through these periods in which they eventually, they grow, they're born, they prosper, and then they eventually sort of crystallize, and then they die. And so he believed that we were in the decline of the West. Now, he wrote this book in 1918, and then he wrote the second volume a few years later. The book we're going to be talking about tonight is Man and Technics, and this is a book, a small one. As you can see, it's not super thick. It's readable. You can get through this in a day. But it was his critique of technology, and he wrote this in 1931. Now, Spengler dies, I believe, in 1938. I should probably double-check that. 1936 he's died. So this is near the end of his life. And one of the last, well, I think he had one or two more, I think, on Prussianism and socialism. He had, maybe he wrote that after this book. But this is near the end of his career. And this is really his critique of technology, of the Faustian civilization. So in The Decline of the West, and that's where I almost have to give you a little bit of framework for tonight's book, for the discussion on Man and Technics, because it does refer to this book a little bit. But we're not covering The Decline of the West, and as you can see, that would take us a while if we did. Man and Technics, though, he continues his theory that Western civilization is what he considered a sort of Faustian civilization, or a Faustian culture, or a Faustian cultural spirit, because for one of his main theories is that cultures themselves are living organisms, and that a culture itself is a sort of living soul. And these cultures then are living entities that grow, like I said, prosper, and eventually die. He has a very Greek understanding of history, so he breaks from a Christian understanding of a sort of beginning, middle, and end, a linear understanding of historical time. And when we go through this book, it's not very Christian per se. However, there's some of the things that he talks about we can certainly redirect, reframe, and sort of Christianize, if we will. But this book, again, think about it. We're talking 1931. He's in Germany. One of the reasons why Oswald Spengler is very controversial is due to his sympathy towards the Third Reich, which was certainly developing at that time, and him being a sort of intellectual catalyst for aspects of that movement. So he does dive into it. We'll get a little racy, if you will, at points, but we're going to try to sanitize it as much as we can. But he does have this sort of love for German culture, okay? And one of the frameworks for this book is he believes, again, that there's these different types of cultures. Eastern Orthodoxy, for example, he couches in a term called the sort of Magian civilization, a sort of magical framework in which that would include Islam, that would include Judaism, that would include Eastern Orthodoxy. However, he talks about Western Christianity, Western civilization, he argues is a Faustian civilization. Faustian in the sense that they've made a sort of symbolic, because he's not exactly a theologian or puts forth a theological framework, but he says that Western civilization has made a pact, again, using Goethe's Faust, the play of Faust, Again, one of the high literary achievements of German culture, Faust, right? So again, he's very sympathetic in promoting of German culture at this point, but he was already seeing, this is after World War I, he's already seeing this tension within the Faustian civilization. That would include, as he talks about, all the Nordic cultures or Nordic-based cultures. So that's Germany, that's France, that's America, that's England, that's Canada. And so he said there's a tension basically between materialism and idealism, and he is trying to make a contribution to philosophy by situating himself somewhere in the middle. Now, again, we can already see, those familiar with philosophy, you have the analytical tradition, that Anglo tradition, that empirical tradition, and then you have the phenomenological tradition coming out of continental philosophy, European philosophy, German philosophy, right? We get idealism, phenomenology, moving out of from Kant into Hegel into Husserl and Heidegger, right? So he is then trying to situate himself somewhere in the middle and trying to describe this ending point, how the Faustian culture, the Faustian civilization is getting ready to come to an end. Now, he already makes that case here, but here he's trying to say how technology is going to play that role. And so some of the frameworks for tonight's conversation is he uses a Nietzschean will to power. Now, he's not completely Nietzschean because he's going to adopt a Darwinian understanding of human evolution. So obviously I don't support at least macro theories of evolution. I do support micro evolution. That would be speciation. However, he's going to be a proponent of Darwinianism and a proponent of two Nietzschean aspects. One, about the sort of lack of intrinsic value within history. History has no ultimate meaning other than watching the emergence of these living organisms, cultures emerge, prosper, grow, and die. And so history really has no intrinsic meaning. He doesn't have a divine or a theological framework for the historical development. As I said, he breaks from a Christian worldview and almost believes in a sort of secular framework, moving back to something more akin to the ancient Greeks. And he then also adopts the Nietzschean will to power. And this is going to be very essential to how he characterizes man as a beast of prey. And there's actually a chapter, again, we're going to move through all the chapters in this book, where he talks about herbivores and predatory animals. And he talks about the differences in the placements of the eyes. He talks about the different in the techniques in which they survive. So predatory animals have to stalk. They have to do different, as he'll talk about, techniques, which is not the same thing as tools, and it's not the same thing as technology. I'll describe that here in a minute. But the herbivores, these ungulate animals, they survive based on numbers, and that they then are hunted, and that the predatory animals, they survive based on a sort of competency, again, a sort of will to power the environments in which they exist. And he argues that man is, in fact, a predatory animal. And so you already see the Darwinian framework, and you can already see where he's going with the Nietzschean will to power. And so man then, because we have hands, because we walk upright, because we walk on 2 feet, because of the placement of our eyes, we occupy a very sort of different ontological realm. And so he talks about, so technics, man and technics, you'd immediately think, oh, technics, he's talking about technology. Well, it is a critique of technology, but technics is actually not equal to technology. Technics for him is the cultural noetic values in which we create and implement tools or technologies. You see, if you went to a museum on Egyptian history and you saw some rod that they have in a museum, that is not technics. The technics is the cultural know-withal of how to create that, how to use it, how its implementation. And so he talks about, for example, let's think of a predatory animal like a lion versus somebody who's playing a violin. He would say there's techniques in both ways. The paws in which the lion has, different animals have paws. Different animals have the same teeth, but the way in which they're utilized, that's techniques. That is something you can't touch. That's something noetic, if you will. As he would argue, it's in the soul, again, but he's not theological, so it's kind of, again, if we were going to critique his worldview, we'd definitely critique his metaphysics because he has no basis on talking about these things. But again, never mind. So technics for him is the sort of cultural wherewithal of how to use these things. And so a violin player, for example, humanity creates things and we have cultures around them on how to use the violin, different styles of violin play, different songs. Songs mean different things. And that is technics in the human sense. And in the innate animal sense, technics is innate to the species. So, for example, a lion uses paws and claws and teeth, maybe in different ways than other animals, also have those same features. So those features, you could say, are the tools, but the techniques are how it's utilized. And so techniques is innate into predatory animals, or animals generally speaking, but humans is not innate. It's within these cultures that we form. And so every culture has different techniques, different ways in which we understand the utility of tools, how we create them, how we implement them. And that's what he's trying to talk about. Not, again, you go into the museum, not the thing you can see, but the entire cultural noetic landscape of which why that thing even emerged, how it was used, why it was colored a certain way, how it was handled, again, in the person that was talented enough to use it. That's what he's trying to articulate. And so cultures, as I said, are living souls for him. But again, we're not going to sit here and criticize him because of the metaphysics. Yes, he doesn't really have a place to really root that. But the West, as he argues again in this book, the West is Faustian. So he has, in the decline of the West, he has really three major types of civilization. He has an Apollonian civilization, a Magian civilization, and Faustian civilizations. Okay, and so the Apollonian would be ancient Greece, ancient Rome. Spengler saw that the worldview was being characterized by appreciation for the beauty of the human body and a preference for the local and present moment. So Apollonian cultures are focused on beauty and harmony. The Magian cultures, which again, where he would root early Christianity, he would root Orthodoxy, he would root all the Eastern Orthodox countries and stuff within the Magian landscape. What does that mean? He's talking about cultural and civilization includes the Jews from about 400 BC to, again, early Christianity, including Islam, which he described as having a world feeling that revolved around the concept of the world as a cavern, epitomized by the sort of domed religious orientations you could see of orthodoxy in Islam, and a preoccupation with essence. Spengler saw the development of this culture as being distorted by two influential presences of older civilizations and the initial vigorous expansionary impulses, which, again, you would look at Russia and Islam in his estimation to understand that stuff. Now, I do have a thing, I have some notes on, I want to say what actually Spengler says about Eastern Orthodoxy. I took some notes on that from, again, The Decline of the West. So that's not in here, that's not in this book, but that's in The Decline of the West. We'll get to that in just a moment. The Faustian civilization, though, is Western Christian civilization. And he said, according to Spengler, the Faustian culture began in Western Europe around the 10th century and had such expansionary power that by the 20th century, it was covering the entire earth, only with a few regions where Islam provided an alternative worldview. And he described it as having a world feeling inspired by the concept of infinitely wide and profound space, a yearning towards distance and infinity. The term Faustian, of course, is referring back to Goethe's Faust and had a massive effect on Spengler. And so for the Faustian spirit, the Faustian culture, the Faustian civilization, he argues in a way it's characterized by the absolute pursuit of knowledge and power. And in this book, he even says, it's in a way, it's a world in where one's trying to become God, that the fight against nature in the Faustian worldview is leading to a point in which man has full dominion of nature. In a way, he becomes God. But unfortunately, the technology, the industrialism has already undermined that civilization and is quickly coming to an end. I know I'll get to that in just a moment. So he argues, why is it coming to an end? Why has the Faustian pursuit of knowledge and power already undercut Western civilization? Well, he says, if you just look in Western civilization, he argues that it's the entrepreneurs, it's the inventors, the engineers that are now the religious leaders, that are now the artists. He argues that technology is now in a way, the sort of the landscape in which the art is being laid out, right? It is the new canvas for the artist. Engineering, technology itself, industrial. Now remember, this is also before digital technologies. This is 1931. So this is before computer technologies and all that stuff. So those who were born leaders, he argues that the machine world, the industrial world, we are now slaves to the machine. So in this, again, you can see with the really actually poetic relationship of the Faustian metaphor, this pact we made with the devil, right? Faust, and I'm going to actually describe the fullness of who Faust is just so we can better understand. But Faust is an intellectual, a disenfranchised intellectual who makes a deal with the devil in pursuit of knowledge and power, right? And so Western civilization, taking on this Faustian archetype, has been trying to dominate nature, be in pursuit of all of nature's secrets so it can be in control of it. And that the Industrial Revolution, as where he stood in the beginning of the 20th century, he saw that these machine technologies no longer were under the aegis of us, but now we were under the aegis of them. And so that the machines were actually enslaving us. And isn't that poetic? Isn't that a great metaphor for Western civilization? Again, this deal with the devil. And when we look now in the 21st century, I mean, he would be horrified to see the state, but at the same time, he sort of expected it. He saw that there's, again, we can speculate, but he argued that there's about 200 more years to Western civilization after the beginning of the 20th century. And he believed it was going to be characterized by, again, this pursuit of technological power and prowess, and that it was going to divide Western civilization. So those, as opposed to older cultures where the leaders who ruled the culture and then the peasants or the gentry or the people who generally, worked the fields and stuff, they were all under the same page, if you will. But he said, no, unfortunately, due to the decline of the West, due to the point of where we are in Western civilization, actually what's going to happen is it's going to spread the differentiation between those who are still sort of pursuing this new expedition, again, like Columbus, like Galileo, like, Copernicus, that he said all these people were like in pursuit of the leading edge of Western civilization. And the people who are still doing that, it's going to get fewer and fewer and fewer, and that they're going to attain more and more and more money and more and more and more power and more people of Western civilization. We're actually going to be disenfranchised by it. And so he said one of the problems that he was already seeing before World War II is that the best, the brightest, the best leaders of Western civilization were already sensing that they were under the power of the machines and that they were wanting to escape this, and that people were already wanting to move back to nature, get closer to nature, and not be engrossed into this mechanical world. And so fewer and fewer of people will be leading the technology, while most of us will become slaves to the technological, industrial, mechanistic system itself. And so the West is battling between materialism versus idealism, as I said. Oh, shout out to Jim Bob. Thank you so much, brother. He says, support this man for his energy and thoroughness. Thank you so much, Jim Bob. By the way, guys, Jim Bob's going to be on tomorrow, and we're going to be doing a little bit of a review of that incredible debate he had. God bless Jim Bob. Shout out to you, brother. God bless you and the family. Thank you so much, man, for the support. I truly do appreciate it. And so definitely tune in tomorrow at 2:00 Eastern Standard, 12 Mountain Time. We're going to be hopping on, and we're going to be doing a little bit of a review of Jim Bob and Owen Benjamin's debate tomorrow. So hope you guys can join us. But continuing on here, the West is battling between materialism, idealism. In a way, this is how he saw World War II. He saw the poetry and the idealism of Germany battling the materialism of the Anglosphere, which he tied to Marxism. So then you think, oh, the allies between the Soviet Union and America and England and France. He said, oh, it makes sense. For Spengler, that all makes sense because those cultures are already engrossed by a materialistic presupposition. And so whether it's communism, whether it's Marxism, or whether it's American capitalism, he says those are both what he would consider the materialistic forms of this Faustian spirit, where he saw, in his argument, again, we don't have to agree with this, but in his argument, that German culture was that idealistic form of the Faustian spirit. And so the West was then going to battle each other. And of course, this is right on the precipice of World War II. He wrote this in 1931. Remember, 1931. And so technics, as I said, are not equal to tools and technology. Technics is the noetic cultural implementation of how to use them, how to make them, how to celebrate somebody who has talent with them. And so man's technics is cultural. And he says it's due to our hand. That the reason why our technics is not innate like the predatory animals, despite him arguing that we are predatory animals, he says the reason why it's not, it's because the hand. Because the hand, we can shape, we can create tools, we can pick up tools, and as soon as the hand grabs the baseball bat is the whole arm. You see my arm leading to the baseball bat, leading to the cleaver, the knife, the sword. The hand allows the extension of man through will, right? Because he argues that the contracting of your hand itself is a symbol of the will to power. That the hand itself can take and grasp and become the tool that it wants to hold. And he said, this is the technique of human culture. That's why the techniques is not innate for us. It's cultural. And so man's techniques is cultural. And in that there is no single, as I said, historical context. So he says there is no intrinsic value to the meaning of history. And he also disregards the idea that there's a single human experience. Now, again, we're all animals in his worldview. We're all men or mankind. But he says, you know what? There is no actual historical context because the historical context, the time, the language, the culture, the place, those shape who you are as a person, and it shapes your free will. So he believed in free will. You have choice, but you only have choice in the limited context of the cultural and the time period you exist in. And so that was his argument. So again, we're going to get into all this stuff, and we're going to move through chapter by chapter. I have a bunch of highlights, and we're just going to read through it. But like I said, not very Christian. It's a Nietzschean will to power. It's a Darwinian framework. It's a Nietzschean understanding of history itself. But it has some really interesting things. And I'll tell you, by the time we get to the last chapter, which is titled The Last Act, Rise and End of the Machine Culture, which again is the Faustian culture that the West is characterized by. I tell you, it hits pretty hard. It's actually pretty good. So it's going to hit on a pretty high note. And I think we as Christians, you know, him seeing this machine slavery, this end of Western civilization, for him, he says, optimism is cowardice. We're going to read that. Optimism is cowardice, right? If you really want to be a man, if you really want to be a Western man, you need to be pessimistic about the future. And despite the pessimism, you need to stand there and fight. And that's what he argues. And so he ends the book with the archetype of, Achilles. And the Roman soldier, there's a Roman soldier in Vesuvius that when the volcano erupted, his body was later found, this is, I think, the end of the 19th century, they found his body, that it was this Roman soldier who was never let off duty. That he stood there and he stayed on duty despite the eruption of the volcano. And he said, this is exactly the state of Western man. Now, again, he's in favor of all this stuff. So he says, your duty right now is to fight like hell in favor of Western civilization. Because the way this book ends, he argues, the way in which the Faustian Pact ends is that all that knowledge and know-how that he says is intrinsic to the soul of Western man, it's going to get in the hands of all the people who hate the West. And that even the people who control the West, they're going to be controlled by materialism, which, again, actually, in his view, won out in World War II. Now, he dies before World War II, but in his worldview, again, the Anglosphere, French, Marxism, these are the material forms of the Faustian Western spirit. They win out in World War II. And so that even the people who lead us are going to sell us out, meaning Western civilization. And so he argues that the Chinese and the Japanese and what he says, the colored people of the world, they're going to have the technology. And what they're going to do is they're going to implement it against the West itself. And so that's his argument. And so we're going to move through it. Again, a lot of things are not very Christian. And a lot of things we're going to disagree with, but even the end that we're going to become machines that are slaves to these machines, isn't this perfect for Christian eschatology and the understanding that, again, the world moves towards the Antichrist itself? I mean, he talks about how the Faustian spirit by the end is going to be characterized by a sort of dominant global government that's going to be led by a sort of dictator. Now, he thought this should be like an orchestra because he was very much in favor of socialistic ideas. He just hated Marxism. And so I think one of the framework, maybe I think I highlighted, but he talks about how if idealism is the lack of a touch to reality, materialism is detrimental to its shallowness, that it doesn't think forwardly. It's always consumed with the material, with the moment at hand, with its own pleasures, with its own powers, with its own implementation. So when he thinks that the machine world is going to enslave us, I mean, as Christians, don't we think in a way that's part of the Antichrist? That's part of this ending system. That is the one world government. That is how, again, the Antichrist is going to rule the one world government from Jerusalem. You know, as our Christian, even though, again, he was very, antagonistic towards traditional Christian worldviews, it actually kind of coalesces and sort of sits right side by side. It's sort of a parallel vision, if you will. So that's what we're going to get into. Major shout out to Justin. Shout out to Justin for sponsoring tonight's stream. God bless you, brother. Thank you very much. Shout out to Justin M. And so I want to do a little bit of housekeeping. Everybody smash that like. Again, special thank you. We already got some super chats. Special shout out to Amptown1. Thank you very much for the $5 super chat. Thank you so much. Made by Jim Bob. Again, he's going to be on tomorrow. We're going to be reviewing his debate with Owen. We'll be opening up the panel. You guys will be able to hop in. We'll be talking about the Trinity, stuff like that. And then it looks like Kincaid7's already thrown in $10. Shout out to Kincaid7. Says, God bless you, brother. I've been getting a lot of Subdeacon Mark's lectures. Thank you for the work you put in for us. Well, thank you so much, Kincaid7, for the $10 super chat. And Justin M throws in $25. Thank you so much, Justin M, the sponsor of tonight's stream, and says, I believe you can really see Spengler's influence on Martin Heidegger's works, writings on the Faustian core of fascism, and Giovanni Gentili being heavily influenced by Hegel, aka Spirit Man. Yeah, Spirit Man wrote the philosophy of fascism. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. And that's why he calls this a contribution to a philosophy of life, because, as I said, the West is split between the idealism of the Germans and the materialism of the Anglosphere and Marxism. And so he's trying to make an argument somewhere right in the middle. And that's why it's Man in Technics, a contribution to a philosophy of life. That's what he thought he was doing. That's what the enterprise generally was. Now, again, major shout out to Justin, and thank you so much, brother, for sponsoring this stream. I want to say, if you guys also have a topic or a book you'd like for me to dive into, sponsor it with this link right here. You can go to the website, click on shop. There's a live stream option, and you can choose a topic. You can't tell me what I got to argue for, but you can give me a topic, and I will do the research. I'll dive into it, and I'll present it the way I prefer to present it. And so if you like tonight's stream and some of the other sponsor streams, sponsor a stream yourself. It's a great way to support my work. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. Also, the best way to support my work is to become a website member. Shout out to Thomas Henderson right there, one of our premium members. Thomas, let him know that, again, if you would like to really help me out, become a premium member. It's $25 a month. You get access to all the fitness stuff, all the exclusive library, and we meet twice a month for the premium members and once a month for the fitness. You get access to all that. It's for $25 a month. I'd greatly, greatly appreciate it. That's a great way you can support my work. Also, if you guys, you'd rather sit and you talk privately about a topic, maybe you want to talk about world history, you want to talk about philosophy, theology, life, fitness, whatever it is, you can purchase a one-on-one session also with this link right here. It's another great way to support my work. I would greatly, greatly appreciate it. I also, like I said, want to say Jim Bob's going to be on tomorrow, made by Jim Bob. Shout out to him. He did a great job with a very difficult opponent, Owen Benjamin, 2 days ago. And so he's going to come on, and we're just going to talk a little bit about the Trinity, talk about debate, talk about orthodoxy. Hopefully Posh Redneck shows up and he can join us. And so that's going to be tomorrow. We'll be doing a debate review. And that basically takes care of the housekeeping. So guys, thank you so much. I truly do appreciate the support. God bless you guys. Thank you so much for all the super chats already. I truly do appreciate it. Okay, now let's get into this book. So chapter 1 here. Chapter 1 is Technics as the tactics of living. See, because Technics, the tactic, it's not about the tool. It's not about the technology. It's about the tactics. It's about the noetic cultural knowability of it. That's what he's talking about. And so, as you can see, I have things highlighted and stuff like that. That's how I'm going to move through these chapters. I'm going to literally just read it and reflect on the different ideas. So, Chapter 1, Technics as a Tactics of Living. Chapter 1. So, if you guys even have this book, I'm on page 23, and right at the bottom it says, "What is the significance of technics? What meaning within history or value within life does it possess? What moral and metaphysical dimensions does it have?" Many answers were given, but ultimately they're reducible to two. On the one side, there are the idealists, the ideologues, the beleaguered stragglers of the humanistic classicism of Goethe's age, who generally, and so Goethe's age. So actually, we need to go over some things. Before we even dive into here, come on. Let's dive into some stuff real quick, just so we're all on the same page before we start getting into any details. Okay. Okay, so who is Oswald Spengler? Again, he was a German polymath. Areas of interest include history, philosophy, mathematics, science, art, as well as their relation to the organic theory of history. He is best known for his 2-volume work, The Decline of the West. I got both volumes here, ginormous volumes. Published in 1918 and 1922, covering human history. Spengler's model of history postulates that human cultures and civilizations are akin to biological entities, each with a limited, predictable, and deterministic lifespan. Spengler predicted that after about the year 2000, so moving into the 21st century, Western civilization would enter the period of pre-death emergency, whose countering would lead to 200 years of Caesarism, extra constitutional omnipotence of an executive branch of government. Oh, maybe like a one world government, maybe like an antichrist system? Interesting. Before Western civilization's final collapse. Spengler is regarded as a nationalist and anti-democrat. He was a proponent member of the Weimar Conservative Revolution, although he voted for Adolf. They actually didn't get along very much. So, in the Nazis, he had viewed them as an ally to provide respectable pedigree to their ideology. He later criticized the Third Reich due to its excessive racialist elements, which led him to his work being sidelined in the final years. He saw Benito Mussolini and entrepreneurial types like the mining magnate Cecil Rhodes as examples of impending Caesar's Western culture, showcasing the stark criticism of Mussolini's imperial adventures. He strongly influenced other historians, including Franz Borcanu and especially Arnold J. Toynbee. He was an English historian, and other successors, yada, yada, yada. Okay. So Decline of the West, like I said, there's these three cultures like this. Okay, the Faustian, the Magian, and the Apollonian. Now, I want to read to you, I took some notes on what does he say about Eastern Orthodoxy. So Orthodoxy for him is the Magian. He lumps Judaism and Islam in the same branch, this Magian form of civilization, okay? And so for him, he discusses Eastern Orthodoxy as one of the religious or cultural expressions of the Magian or Semitic civilization, which he defines as the first of the two major civilizations to emerge in the world. According to Spengler, the Magian civilization is characterized by a mystical and religious worldview, as opposed to a technological or pursuit of knowledge and power worldview, the Faustian, and is based on the idea of a divinely ordained order in the world. Yeah, I would agree with that. That's a pretty good characteristic. Spengler argues that Eastern Orthodox Christianity is an expression of the Magian civilization, and that it embodies the religious and mystical values that are central to the Magian worldview. He notes that Eastern Orthodoxy is deeply rooted in the ancient tradition of the Eastern Roman Byzantine Empire, and it is represented as the true fusion of the Greco-Roman and the Semitic cultural elements. Spengler contends that Eastern Orthodox Christianity has been shaped by the religious and cultural traditions of the Magian civilization, and that it represents a distinct cultural expression that is different and distinct from that of Western Christianity, which he argues emerged from the Faustian civilization. Overall, Spengler views Eastern Orthodox Christianity as a central part of the Magian, and that its cultural and religious traditions have played a key role in shaping the development and evolution of those civilizations. Okay, so I just wanted to share that with you guys so you can see what he's doing here. So, again, Man and Technics, this is what we're looking at today, is a short book by Oswald Spengler in which the author discusses a critique of technology and industrialism and uses the Nietzschean concept of the will to power to understand man's nature. It is published, in German, in 1931. The principal idea of the work is that many of the Western world's great achievements may soon become spectacles of our descendants to marvel at, as we do with the pyramids of Egypt and the baths of Rome. Spengler especially pointed to the tendency of Western technology to spread to hostile colored races, which would then use the weapons against the West. In Spengler's view, Western culture will be destroyed from within by materialism and destroyed from without by the economic competition and warfare of others. Now, again, Faust. We're going to be hearing about Faust, Goethe, Faustian civilization. So I want to sum up, what is Faust? Faust is that play, again, written by Johann Goethe. Faust is one of it's arguably, you could argue, I think many have, it's sort of the epitome of German literary art. Okay, so Faust is unsatisfied with his life as a scholar and becomes depressed. After an attempt to take his own life, he calls on the devil for further knowledge and magic powers with which to indulge all the pleasure and knowledge of the world. In response, the devil's representative, Mephistopheles, appears. He makes a bargain with Faust. Mephistopheles will serve Faust with his magic powers for a set number of years, but at the end of the term, the devil will claim Faust's soul, and Faust will be eternally enslaved. So again, isn't that a great metaphor, as we've already as Christians talking about the, again, potential relationship to the Antichrist, or even our Christian understanding of history? Isn't that really quite useful? That the devil claims the soul of Faust, the devil claims the soul of Western civilization, that this one world technocratic government, right, that has that Caesarism, that incredible single individual who's going to rule this empire. Interesting. Again, this guy's not Christian at all. During the term of the bargain, Faust makes use of Mephistopheles in various ways. In Goethe's drama and many subsequent versions of the story, Mephistopheles helps Faust seduce a beautiful and innocent girl, usually named Gretchen, whose life is ultimately destroyed when she gives birth to Faust's bastard son. Again, he lured her in through magic, through satanic magic, through the use of the devil. Realizing this unholy act and who Faust really is and who he's in league with, she drowns the child and is held for murder. Woo! What a interesting symbolism. However, Gretchen's innocence saves her in the end, and she's able to enter heaven after her execution. In Goethe's rendition, Faust is saved by God via his constant striving in combination with Gretchen's pleadings with God in the form of the external feminine. However, in the early tales, Faust is irrevocably corrupted and believes his sins cannot be forgiven. When the term ends, the devil carries him off to hell. Okay, so now we have a better understanding of who Spengler is, what this book's about, the Faustian civilization, and who Faust and why he's using that symbolism. Okay, let's continue. So there's two types of the Faustian, the Western civilization. On the one side, there's the idealists, the ideologues, the belated stragglers of the humanistic classicism of Goethe. Goethe wrote Faust, of Goethe's age. And again, when was this written? Again, if we go here, where is Goethe? Let's go back. Let's find Goethe's Faust. Where is that? There we go. Okay, and so this was written in, again, so we see right there, 1749, 1832. Well, why is that important? Because that's again Kant, that's Hegel, That's the height of German culture. The height of German culture, right? Hegel represents the sort of endpoint of German culture. Again, his German idealism, the Hegelian dialectic, and then sort of German culture is really in a constant decline from that period. You can see why the Germans are constantly trying to revive that spirit, that German nationalistic spirit. So, who generally regarded technical matters as economic issues as separate from culture and beneath it. Goethe, with his grand sense of all things real, had attempted to probe this new fact world to its deepest depths in the second part of the play Faust. Okay, on the other hand, there was a materialism that was essentially of English provenance. That's what he's arguing, which was the fashion among the half-educated. You see, he's taken a jab at the English, among the half-educated during the latter half of the 19th century, of liberal cultural pages and radical popular assemblies of Marxist social ethical writers who fancied themselves as thinkers and poets. So he's very, very anti-Marx. So throughout this work, Spengler hates Marx. That's for a fact. If the characteristic of the first class was a lack of sense of reality, the idealist, Goethe, high German culture, the second was a devastating shallowness, that English, that Marxian materialism. Its idea was utility, and utility only. That for him, disgusting. There's no beauty in just utility, which he argues that's the American, that Anglo material spirit. It's all about utility. Whatever was useful to humanity was a legitimate element of culture. It was a fact of culture. The rest was luxury, superstition, or barbarism. Utility meant what was conducive to the happiness of the majority, and this happiness consisted of leisure. This is the final analysis of the doctrine of Bentham, Mill, and Spencer. The aim of mankind was held to consist in relieving the individuals as much work as possible and putting the burden on the machine. And so this is part of the enslavement, right? This material part. So he's going to then tie all this back together. Because we put all the work on the machine, the Faustian spirit, we're going to make the machine stronger and stronger and stronger. We're going to have more and more free time. What happens? We become slaves to the machine in a way. And so you can see even a biblical idea, right? In the Garden of Eden, women have the birth pangs, men have to labor. In a way, a Christian understanding is that labor sets us free. Labor sets us free. This progress Philistine, talking about this material spirit of Faustian culture, became excited over every button that set an apparatus in motion for the supposed sparing of human labor. In the place of the authentic religion of earlier times came an even shallower enthusiasm for the achievements of humanity, by which nothing more was meant than progress in the techniques of labor saving and amusement making. Of the soul, not one word was discussed. Not one word was discussed. And with the complete lack of imagination, this is the hallmark of materialism. In every civilization, there is formed a vision of the future in which the ultimate object and the final permanent condition of humanity is an earthly paradise conceived in terms of technical trends of, say, the 80s of the last century. That's the 1880s. 1880s, a rather startling negation, by the way, of the very concept of progress, which by definition excludes permanent conditions. No more war, they say, no more distinctions, no more races, no more peoples and states, no more singular religions, no more criminals, no more adventures, no more conflicts arising out of superiorities and differences, no hate or vengeance anymore, but eternal comfort throughout the millennia. This is the promise of the material Faustian spirit. And so we're going to skip forward and we're going to move over to the second section of this first chapter, and he goes like this. For in reality, Technics is ancient. And moreover, it is not something historically specific, but something overwhelmingly general. It extends far beyond mankind, back into the life of the animals. In all of animals, in contrast to plant life, animals are capable of moving about freely and possess some measure, great or small, of self-will and independent form, nature considered as a whole. Accordingly, in possessing these, it is obliged to maintain itself against nature, to give its own being some sort of a significance, some sort of identity, some sort of superiority. Thus, the significance of technics may only be seen in terms of the soul. So what did he do there? We see already the Nietzschean will to power, but he's adding a metaphysical soul to it, right? So anima is, right? We know that means soul, right? In the ancient Greeks, animals had souls. Okay, so the soul has to do with one's free will and movement. Spengler's making the same argument. And so he's saying that will to power that animals have, not the plants, but it's part of this will to power that gives you an identity in regards to your opposition to the natural forces of nature. Moving on. Technics is the tactics of all life, right? It is the inner form of the process utilized in that struggle, which is identical with life itself. This is the second error that has to be avoided here. Technics is not to be understood as mere tools. What matters is not how one fashions things, but the process of how they are used and utilized and implemented. Not the weapon, but the battle. Modern warfare, in which decisive elements is tactics, that is the technique of running the war. The techniques of inventing, producing, and handling the weapons being only items in the process as a whole points to a general truth. There are innumerable techniques in which no tools are used at all. Again, he's talking about the noetic cultural value. These, again, cultures are living beings, that they have the techniques of how to utilize these things. They're situated within a culture. There are innumerable techniques which there are no tools used at all. That of a lion outwitting a gazelle, for instance, or that of human diplomacy. And it is just that is so often overlooked in the study of prehistory, in which far too much attention is paid to things in museums and far too little attention to the innumerable processes that must have been in existence, even though they have vanished without leaving a single trace. What's he talking about? The noetic values of the cultural soul at hand. Every machine serves some one process and owes its existence to a thought that pre-exists the process of itself. So every machine is created to do a process, a typewriter, for example. But the typewriter is pre-existed by the thought of what the typewriter should do, how it should work, why it functions, and how it situates itself within culture. That's technics. They are all just sides of one active, fighting, and charged life. Nevertheless, a path does not lead to the primeval warring of extinct beasts, to the process of modern inventors and engineers. And likewise, there is a path from the trick, oldest of all weapons, to design of the machines in which today we make war on nature by outmaneuvering her. One calls this progress. This was the greatest catchword of the last century, the 19th century, the 1800s. Men saw history before them like a street on which bravely and ever forward marched mankind, essentially meaning by the term the white races, or more exactly, the inhabitants of the great cities within those nations, or more exactly still, the highly educated within the great cities of those nations. Okay? And so it ends, or I'm ending it, so you see I'm skipping all the way back forward here. There are no men in themselves, such as the philosophers prattle about, but only men of a time, of a specific locality, situated as a specific race, of a certain personality type, who contend in battle with a given world and win through or fail, while the universe around them moves slowly on with a godlike unconcern. This battle is life, and life is the true Nietzschean sense of a cruel, pitiless, relentless battle deriving from the will to power. Okay, so what did he just do? Again, he used that Nietzschean framework. It's all about the will to power. Men are always situated within a cultural context. Technics is the noetic capability within that culture. And all cultures, because men are beasts of prey, we are always then trying to situate our cultures and battling not just against nature, but against other men themselves. That's kind of, again, wrapping up that first chapter. That's really what he's trying to talk about. Okay, now we're going to move into this next chapter, herbivores and beasts of prey. Herbivores and beasts of prey. Man, as again he starts, man is a beast of prey. So what does he mean by that? Let's move forward here. So now we're on the next page. We're going to read this section, page 35. The animal of prey is the highest form of mobile life. It implies a maximum of freedom from others and for oneself, of self-responsibility, of independence, and an extreme of necessity, where that self can hold its own only by fighting and winning and destroying. So you see the Nietzschean lens that he's continually referring back to. It imparts a high dignity to man as a type, that he is the beast of prey. A herbivore is, by its destiny, actually prey, and it seeks to avoid this destiny by escaping without combat. But beast of prey must get the prey. The one type of life is the innermost essence of the defensive. The other is offensive, hard, cruel, destructive. The difference appears even in the tactics of movement. On the one hand, the habit of retreating, fleetness, cutting of corners, evasion, concealment. And on the other hand is the straight line of motion of the attack, the lion's spring, the eagle's swoop. There are dodges and counter dodges alike in the style of the strong and in that of the weak. Cleverness, in the human sense, active cleverness, belongs only to the beast of prey. Herbivores are by comparison stupid, and not merely the innocent dove and the elephant, but the noblest sorts like the bull, the horse, and the deer. Only a blind rage or sexual excitement are these capable of fighting. Otherwise, they will allow themselves to be tamed, and like a child, they can be led. And a child can lead them. Besides these differences, hold on. I do want to point out, we're going to keep going through this herbivore and prey thing. Think about vegans. Think about the fact that we live in a society where they're continually trying to get us to stop eating meat. And I'm not saying I'm supporting Spengler's idea that we're beasts of prey, but certainly about the omnivorous consumption of animal products. There's something there in regards to the powers that be, right? This differentiated elite that he speculated would get further and further away from us. Even Plato said, you need to not let the masses eat meat. We're going to continue on, but keep this in mind. As he's talking about the herbivores, think a little bit about men who actually only eat vegetarian diets. Okay, let's move forward. Besides these differences, there is a kind of motion. There are others still more effective, the organs of sense. For these are accompanied by differences in the manner of sensing or of having a world. The higher herbivores are ruled by the ear. They're ruled by the ear, but above all, by scent. The higher carnivores, on the other hand, are ruled by the eye. Scent is the characteristically defensive sense. The nose catches the point of origin and the distance of danger, and so gives the movement of one's flight the appropriate direction away from something. It's a defensive sense. Whereas the eyes, you move towards the thing that you look at. You pursue the goal. But the eye of the preying animal gives a target. The very fact that in the great carnivores, as in man, the two eyes can be fixed on one point in the environment enables the animal to bind its prey. In that hostile glare, there is already implicit for the victim the doom that it cannot escape, the pounce that is instantly to follow. But this act of fixation by two eyes disposed forward and parallel is equivalent to the birth of the world in the sense that man possesses it. That is, as a picture, as a world before the eyes, as a world not merely of lights and colors, but of prescriptive distance, of space and motions in space, of the objects situated at definite points, the way of seeing which all the high carnivores possess, the herbivores, the ungulates, the eyes are set sideways. Each giving a different and non-perspective impression implies in itself the notion of commanding. The world picture is the environment as commanded by the eyes. The eye of the beast of prey determines things according to the position and distance. It apprehends the horizon. It measures up the battlefield and objects and conditions of attack, sniffing and spying. The way of the hind and the way of the falcon are related as slavery and dominance. There is an infinite sense of power in this quiet, wide-angle vision, a feeling of freedom that is its source superiority, and its foundations is in the knowledge of greater strength and consequent certainty of being no one's prey. The world is the prey, and in the last analysis, it is owing to the fact that human culture has come into existence. So again, the world is its prey. We are beasts of prey, according to Spengler, right? We then are the beasts ultimately of prey that have the eyes, and as we'll get in the next chapter, have the hands. And so we are in opposition to nature itself because the world is the prey. Okay, moving forward. For strength of individual soul, the herbivore substitute numbers. The herd, a common sentiment of group activities. But the less one needs others, the more powerful one actually is. A beast of prey is everyone's foe. Never does he tolerate an equal in his den. Here we are at the root of the truly royal idea of property. Property is the domain in which one exercises unlimited power. The power that one has gained in combat, defended against one's peers, virtuously upheld. It is not a right to mere possession, but the sovereign right to do as one wills with one's own. Once this is understood, we see that there are carnivore and there are herbivore ethics. No one is in a position to change this. It is the inward form, meaning, and tactics of all life. It is simply a fact. We can annihilate life, but we cannot alter it in its kind. A beast of prey, tamed and in captivity, every zoological garden can furnish examples, is mutilated, is world sick, inwardly dead. Some of the voluntarily hunger strike when they are captured. However, herbivores, they give up nothing to become domesticated. Isn't that interesting? Again, we're not using, we're Christians here. We don't support the same analysis. But isn't it interesting to think about the herbivores, these non-meat eaters, right? They're the ones that go with the herd mentality, the ones that are just hoping that they don't get picked off. That the one who's captive, the beast of prey, he's dying on the inside due to his captivity. But the herbivore, they don't mind being domesticated because their life doesn't change. Think about pornography. Think about the world we live in. Think about, again, the vegan diets. Thinking about the UBI. Is this a form of human domestication in which only the beast of prey, using that analogy here, would be then in opposition to, because they can feel the constraints and entrapping them, closing in on their own freedom? Okay, next section. Does this mean, however, that Technics is actually older than man? Certainly not. There is a vast difference between man and all other animals. The technique of the latter is generic technique. It is neither inventive nor capable of development. The bee type, ever since it existed, has built its honeycombs exactly as it does now, and it will continue to build them in such a way until they are extinct. They belong to it as a form of its wing, of the coloring of its body belong. Okay, so it belongs to its genus, right? So the techniques, the ways in which, right? So the bee, it's not about the honeycomb, but it's about how the bees know to build the honeycomb, how the honeycomb functions. This is the techniques, right, that he's referring to. And he's saying that is innate in the genus of the bee. And it's in the genus of all animals. Man is different. It's not in our genus. It's in our cultures. It's a choice. It's man-made. Bees, termites, and beavers all build wonderful structures. Ants know agriculture, the construction of roads, slavery, and the management of war. Nursing, fornication, and organized migration are widely found and spread. All that man can do, one or another sort of animal has already achieved. Free-moving life in general contains tendencies that exist, dormant as potentialities. Man achieves nothing that is not achievable by life as a whole. And yet, all this has at bottom nothing whatever to do with human technics. The general technique is unalterable. That is what the word instinct means. Animal thought being strictly connected with the immediate here and now, and knowing neither past nor future, knows also neither experience nor anxiety. The unique fact about human technics, on the contrary, is that it is independent of the life of the human genus. It is the one instance in all the history of life in which the individual frees himself from the compulsion of the genus. One has to meditate long upon this thought if one is to grasp its immense implications. Technics in man's life is conscious, arbitrary, alterable, personal, inventive. It is learned and it is improved upon. Man has become the creator of his own tactics of living. This is the grandeur and also his doom. And the inner form of the creativeness we call culture. To be cultured, to cultivate, to suffer from culture. A man's creations are the expressions of this being and personal form. Okay, next chapter. We are in The Origin of Man, Hand and Tool. Hand and Tool. Guys, smash that like if you guys here. I hope everybody's still are enjoying the stream. We're going to continue on here. Chapter 3, The Origin of Man, Hand and Tool. The answer is, though the development of the hand, here is a weapon unparalleled in the world of free-moving life, meaning of animals, of things with souls, he says, right? Compare it with the paw, the beak, the horns, teeth, the tail fins of other creatures. To begin with, the sense of touch is concentrated in it to such a degree that it can almost be called the organ of touch, in the sense that the eye is the organ of vision, and the ear the organ of hearing. It distinguishes not only hot and cold, solid and liquid, hard and soft, but above all, weight. It can distinguish form, position of resistances, and so on. In short, things in space. But over and above this function, the activity of living is gathered into it so completely that the whole bearing and allure of the body has simultaneously taken shape in accordance with it. There is nothing in the whole world that can be compared to this member, the hand, equally capable of touch and action. To the eye of the beast of prey, which commands the world theoretically, it is added, the hand of man commands the world practically. Okay, moving on. Further, not only must man's hand, gait, and posture have come into existence together, so now he's talking about his Darwinian theory of human emergence. So he believes, and this is going to get in the next chapter where we get into language and speech. He thinks all these things sort of came into emergence together. He's speculating on, again, human evolution. Again, we can kind of just pay lip service, hear it, but not really take it in. Okay, all right. You get it. This is a point that no one hitherto has observed. Hands and tool also. The unarmed hand is in itself useless. The unarmed hand is useless. It requires a weapon to become a weapon itself, as the implements took form from the shape of the hand, and so also the hand from the shape of the tool, the sword, a bat, whatever it is. It's all your hand. Once you're able to grab it, the will to power, the will to grasp it, your whole arm, your hand becomes the thing in which you hold. It is meaningless to attempt to define the two chronologically. It is impossible that the formed hand was active when for a short time without its implementation. The earliest remains of man and of his tools are of equal history or equally old. This is what constitutes his liberation from the compulsion of the genus, a phenomenon unique in the history of all life on this planet. With this, man truly comes into his being. He has made his active life to a large extent free of the conditions of his body. The genus instinct still preserves in full strength, but the individual's thoughts and thoughtful activities have detached themselves from its bonds. This freedom consists in freedom of choice. Everyone makes his own weapon according to his own skill and his own reasoning. The many discoveries have failed and discarded pieces still testify to the effort of the initial thinking and doing. The eye seeks out cause and effect, but the hand works on the principle of means and ends. The question of whether something is suitable or unsuitable, the criterion of the doer, has nothing to do with that of the true or false, the values of the observer. And an aim is a fact, while a connection of cause and effect is a truth. In the wise arose the very different modes of thought and the truth man, the priest, the scholar, the philosopher, and the fact man, the statesman, the general, and the merchant. Ever since then, even today, the commanding, directing, and clenching hand is the expression of a will, so much so that we actually have a graphology of the palmistry, not to mention figures of speech such as the heavy hand of the conqueror and the dexterity of the financer and the hand revealed in the work of a criminal or an artist. Okay, so we're going to skip forward here. We're going to skip that whole page. One more paragraph of this chapter. We're going to read this for chapter 3. The soul strides forward to an ever-increasing alienation from all of nature. The weapons of the beasts of prey are natural, but the armed fist of man, with its artificially made, thought out, and selected weapon, is not here begins art. Is not. Let me state that whole sentence again. The weapons of the beast of prey are natural, but the armed fist of man, with its artificially made, thought out, and selected weapon, is not. Here begins art, as a counter concept to that of nature. Every technical process of man is an art, and is always so described. So, for instance, the arts of archery or horsemanship, the art of war, the arts of building and government, and of sacrificing and prophesying, of painting and versification, of scientific experiment. Every work of man is artificial and unnatural, from the lighting of a fire to the achievements that are specifically designated as artistic in high cultures. The privilege of creation has been wrested from nature. Free will itself is an act of rebellion and nothing less. Creative man has stepped out the bounds of nature. With every fresh creation, he departs further and further from her, becoming more and more her enemy. That is world history. The history of a steadily increasing fateful rift between man's world and the universe. The history of a rebel that grows up and raises his hand against his mother. Okay, so what do we get? We understand then man is a beast of prey. Technics is this noetic aspect of culture itself. And the hand is this thing that differentiates man as a beast of prey, because it's not paws and claws and teeth that we dominate. It's the hand. It's the thought outness of the weapon we choose. It's the utility in which we construct from. And it's all about a will to power, right? So again, not very Christian. This idea that for him, too, again, this Faustian culture was the highest of cultures. So we talked about the Apollonian, the Magian, and then the Faustian. So for Spengler, the Faustian culture was, in fact, in his opinion, the most dominant culture. It was the most dominant and powerful form of civilization. So, again, you can see the Nietzschean will to power, and because the Faustian spirit dominated the world and it had the weapons, it had the ships, it had the cannons, it had the guns, it then had the will to power. And for him, being a Darwinian, deservingly so, then they could and deserve to dominate. Okay, now we're moving into the next chapter, which is the second stage, speech and enterprise. Speech and enterprise. Okay. All right. What is speaking? Indubitably, it is a process having for its object the imparting of information, an activity that is practiced continuously by a number of human beings amongst themselves. Speech or language is only an abstraction from this, the inner grammatical form of speaking and therewith of words. This form must be common property and must have a certain permanence if information is really to be imparted by its means. I have elsewhere shown that speaking in sentences is preceded by simpler forms of communication, such as signs for the eye, signals, gestures, and warning and threatening calls. All these continue in use even today as auxiliaries to speaking and melodious speech, emphasis in the play of one's features and hands, and in written speech, punctuation. Nevertheless, fluent speaking is, by reason of its content, something quite new. Ever since Hamann and Herder, men have asked themselves the question of its origin, but if all answers so far have been more or less unsatisfactory, it's because the intention of the question has actually been wrong. For the origin of speaking in words is not to be found in the activity of speaking itself. That was the era of the Romantics, who divorced from reality, as always they do, deduced speech as the primary poetry of mankind. Moreover, they thought that speech was itself this poetry, myth, lyric, prayer rolled all into one, and that prose was merely something that came later, was regarded for common everyday use. But had this been so, the inner form of the speaking, the grammar, and the logical build of the sentence would have been totally different. In reality, it is precisely the very primitive languages that show most emphatically the tendency to mark differences clearly and sharply and unmistakably. The correct way of putting the question is not how, but when did speaking in words come into existence? And once this question takes this form, all very soon becomes clear. The object of speaking in sentences, usually misunderstood or ignored, is settled by the period in which it became customary to speak thus, that is, fluently, and displayed quite clearly in the form of sentence building. Speaking did not arise by way of monologue, nor of sentences by way of oratory. The source is in the conversation of several persons. The object is not one of understanding as a consequence of reflection, but one of reciprocal understanding as a consequence of the question, an answer. What then are the basic forms of speech? Not the judgment and declaration, but the command, the expression of obedience, the enunciation, the question and the affirmation or the negation. These are sentences, originally quite brief, but are invariably addressed to others, such as, do this. Are you ready? Yes, go ahead. Words of designations of notions are the only products of the object of the sentence, and hence it is that the vocabulary of a hunting tribe is from the outset different from that of a village of cowherds or a seafaring coastal population. Originally speaking was a difficult activity, and it may be assumed that it was limited to the bare essentials. Even today, the peasant is slow of speech as compared to the townsman, who is so accustomed to speaking that he cannot hold his tongue and must, from mere boredom, chatter and make conversation as soon as he has nothing else to do, whether he really has anything to say or not. The original object of speech is carrying out an act in accordance with the intention, time, place, and means. Okay, skipping forward, you kind of get the point of what he's trying to do with the language. So, okay, I've already shown that the birth of the armed hand and of the armed hand had at its result a logical separation of two techniques, namely that of making that use of weapon. Similarly, the verbally managed enterprise now leads to the separation of the activities of thought from those of the hand. And every enterprise planning out and carrying out are distinct elements. And from now on, practical thought henceforth takes the leading part. There is a director's work and there is the executant's work. Then this fact has been the basic technical form of all human life ever since. For in the age of verbally managed enterprises, there are not only two sorts of technics. These are the way of diverging more and more definitely as the centuries go on, but also two kinds of men. differentiated by the fact that their talent lying in the one or in the other direction. As in every process, there is a technique of direction and a technique of execution. So equally, self-evidently, there are men whose nature is to command, and there are men whose nature is to obey, subjects and objects of the political or the economic process in question. Admittedly, this is artificial and contrary to nature, but this is just what culture is. Fate may ordain, and at times does ordain, that man should imagine himself able to abolish it artificially, but nevertheless, it is unshakably a fact. He's talking about that even within mankind, there are men who are leaders, and there are men who must obey. Must obey. Running an enterprise is work. And it is only as the result of that work that a manual labor became possible. Similarly, the discovery, thinking out, calculation, and management of new processes is a creative activity of gifted heads. Of the executive role falls to the uncreative as a necessary consequence. Or the executive role. I'm sorry, not the executive role falls to the uncreative as a necessary consequence. And here we meet an old friend, now a little out of date, the question of genius or talent. Genius or talent. Genius is literally creative power, the divine spark of the individual life that in the stream of generations mysteriously and suddenly appears and is extinguished, and a generation later reappears with equal suddenness. Talent is a gift for a particular task already there, which can be developed by tradition, teaching, training, and practice to high effectiveness. Talent in its exercise presupposes genius and not vice versa. Okay, so we're almost done with this chapter here. I see a few more super chats just came in. Shout out to the Goethe Liturgy. So Goethe Liturgy throws in $9.99 and says, epic stream. Thank you so much, Goethe Liturgy, for showing me some love. I truly do appreciate it. And we got two from Dr. Vagisil, throws in a couple super chats. Stimulation from God/word nature leads to peace and relaxation, while stimulation from worldly things leads to anxiety and longing for a feeling you can never quench. And then it looks like Dr. Vagisil threw in another super chat and says, immigrant men come to the U.S. to get lost in the comforting poising of opulence and forget to maintain community connection and become isolated, and their children lose their strong roots to the past humble beginnings that gave the grit to bring this peace. Amen. Amen to that. All right. We're almost done with this chapter. I want to read this section here, and then it looks like I got another section on the next page. Then we'll get to the next chapter, and I'm telling you, the next chapter is where things really heat up. So maybe you find it a little bit boring. Just hold on. I'm telling you, this next chapter is going to keep your interest in. I guarantee it, okay? So last section of the chapter on speech and language, okay? It says, the verbally managed enterprise involves an immense loss of freedom, the old freedom of the beast of prey, for the leader and the led alike. They both become intellectual, spiritual members of a higher unit, body and soul. This we call organization. You see where he's going with the organism of culture? The gathering of the act of life to definite forms into the condition of being and form of the enterprise, whatever it may be. With collective doing, the decisive step is taken from organic to organized existence, from living in natural to living in artificial groupings, from the pack to the people, the tribe to the social class to the state. Out of combats of individual carnivores, there has sprung war as an enterprise of tribe against tribe, with leaders and followers, with organized marches, invasions, and battles. Out of the annihilation of the conquered springs the law that is imposed upon those that are defeated. Human law is ever a law of the stronger to which the weaker must conform. And this law, considered as something enduring between tribes, is peace. Such a peace also prevails within the tribe, so that its forces may be available for external action. The state is the internal order of a people for its external purpose. again, he has this one italicized. The state is the internal order of a people for its external purpose. The state is a form as possibility what the history of a people is actuality. But his story of old as well as today is the history of war. Politics is only a temporary substitute for war that uses more intellectual weapons. And the menfolk of a community are originally synonymous with the army. In this increasing interdependence lies quiet and deep revenge of nature upon the being that has wrested the privilege of creation from her. This petty creator against nature, this revolutionary in the world of life, has become the slave of his creature. The culture, the aggregate of artificial, personal, self-made life forms, develops into a bared cage for the souls that will not be restrained. The beast of prey, who made others his domestic animals in order to exploit them, has now taken himself captive. The great symbol of the fact is the human house. Another symbol of this is his increasing numbers, in which the individual disappears as unimportant. For it is one of the most fateful consequences of the human spirit of enterprise, that of the population multiplies. Where once a pack of a few hundreds roamed, a people of 10,000 now sits. There are scarcely any regions empty for men. People borders on people. And the mere fact of the frontier, the limit of one's own power, arouses the old instincts to hate, to attack, to annihilate. The frontier of whatever kind it may be, even an intellectual frontier, is the mortal foe of the will to power. The soul of this beast of prey is ever hungry. His will is never satisfied. This is the curse that lies upon this kind of life, but also the greatness inherent in its destiny. It is precisely its best specimens that know the least quiet happiness and enjoyment. And so instead of killing the prisoners taken from hostile tribes, men begin to enslave them so as to exploit their bodily strength. This is the origin of slavery, which must be precisely as old as the slavery of domestic animals. In general, these people and tribes multiply so as to say downwards. What grows is not the number of heads, but the number of the hands to do work, right? Witness Frederick the Great saying, "I am the first servant of my state." Hence the desperate efforts of the exceptional man to keep himself inwardly free. Here, and only here, begins the individualism that is a reaction against the psychology of the masses. Hence arise the types of life typified by the conqueror, the individual, the adventurer, the hermit, and even certain types of criminals and bohemians. The wished-for escape from absorption by the masses takes various forms: lordship over it, flight from it, contempt for it. The idea of personality in its dark beginning is a protest against humanity in the mass, and the tension between these grows and grows to its tragic finale. The eagle hates only his peers, envies none, despises many, and indeed all. Contempt looks downwards from the heights, envy peers upwards from below. And these two are the world historical feelings of mankind, organized in state and classes whose forcibly peaceful specimens helplessly rattle the bars of a cage in which they are confined together. Okay, now we're going to get into this last chapter, the last act, the rise and end of the machine culture. So what did we just hear here? And like I said, we're getting ready. This is really the climax of the book is the last chapter, okay? And maybe you're going to hear a little bit of racial language. Again, we're talking about 1931 Germany. So bear with me here. This is not my ideas whatsoever. I'm an Orthodox Christian, but for Spengler. So what he's highlighting is that there's leaders and there's followers. There's the thinkers and there's the executioners, right? The people who execute those which the leaders have thought about, okay? And so This has developed culture, this war against nature, becoming powerful against nature, building, until, as he said, we realize we're inside a cage. The cage is culture. And that we then are inside the cage with those who are leaders and with those who are followers, and we realize we're all in this cage together, and we really don't know what to do, and we begin to hate each other. We begin to despise the situation that we found ourselves in. And so now we move to the last chapter, so let's dive into this one. So here we go. Okay. On this soil, from 3000 BC onwards, there now grew up here and there the high cultures in the narrowest and grandest sense, each filling but a very small portion of Earth's space, and each enduring for hardly 1,000 years. Except for that Byzantine Empire, we've got over 1,000 years. The tempo is that of the final catastrophes. Every decade has significance. Every year almost its special look. It is world history in the most genuine and most exacting sense, that this group of passionate life courses invented for its symbol in the world the city, in contrast to the village of the previous stage, the stone city to which is housed a quite artificial living that has become divorced from Mother Earth, is completely anti-natural. The city of rootless thought that draws the streams of life of the land and uses them up within itself. For what is luxury but culture in its most exacting form? Consider the Athens of Pericles, the Baghdad of Harun al-Rashid, the Rococo. This urban culture is luxury through and through, in all grades and callings, artificial from top to bottom. Think of the Hunger Games, right? We all lived in the peasantry. We all live in the different zones. But the high culture, the luxury, the decadence is inside the cities. And he's saying that's true for all of history. All high cultures demands major cities, high populations. This urban culture is luxury through and through, in all grades and callings, artificial from top to bottom, an affair of arts, whether arts of diplomacy, of living, of adornment, or writing, or thought. Without an economic wealth that is concentrated in the hands of a few, there can be no wealth of art, of thought, or of elegance, not to speak of luxury of possessing a worldview and of thinking theoretically instead of practically. Economic impoverishment at once brings spiritual and artistic impoverishment in its train. And in this sense, the technical process that nature and these cultures are also spiritual luxuries, late, sweet, and fragile fruits of an increasingly artificiality and intellectuality. They begin with the building of the tomb pyramids of Egypt and the Sumerian temple towers of Babylonia, which come into being in the 3rd millennia BC, deep in the south, but signify no more than victory over big masses. Then come the enterprise of the Chinese, the Indian, the classical culture, the Arabian culture, and Mexican cultures. And now, in the 2nd millennium of our era, in the far north, there is our own, the Faustian culture, which represents the victory of pure technical thought over big problems. For these cultures grow up through independently of one another, yet in a series of which, since it is from the south to north, the Faustian Western European culture is probably not the last. But certainly it is the most powerful and the most passionate, and owing to the inward conflict between its comprehensive intellectuality and its profound spiritual disharmony, the most tragic of them all. It is possible that some belated straggler may follow it. For instance, a culture may arise somewhere in the plains between Vistula and Amur during the next millennium. But it is here, in our own, that the struggle between the nature and man whose historic destiny has made him pit himself against her is, to all intents and purposes, has ended. The northern countryside, by the severity of the conditions of life in it, the cold and continuous privation, has forged hard races. With intellect sharpened to the keenest, and the cold fires of an unrestrained passion for fighting, risking, thrusting forward, that which elsewhere I have called the pathos of the third dimension. There are, once more, true beasts of prey whose inner forces struggle fruitlessly to break the superiority of thought, of organized artificial living, over the blood, to turn these into their servants, to elevate the destiny of the free personality to being that very meaning of the word, a will to power which laughs at all bounds of time and space, and indeed regards infinity as its specific target, subjects whole continents to itself, eventually embraces the world and the network of its forms of communication and intercourse, and transforms it by the force of its practical energy and the gigantic power of its technical prowess. Now think about this. Now we talk about, I'm always talking about transhumanism and all the technocracy and the technology and stuff. Think about this. He's talking about the Faustian spirit. Its aim is infinity itself. What are these people like Ray Kurzweil, the age of the spiritual machines? What are they? They want to live for eternity. They want to become omnipotent. They want to become living gods. Right now, I'm actually working through a documentary by yours truly, your favorite, Yuval Harari. That documentary is basically about how technology is going to divinize humanity and what it's going to do. Now, from that perspective, looking at 21st century technology and the aim for complete dominance of the world, a one world government, HARP manipulating weather, maybe the Turkey and Syria and their little earthquake. Did HARP have anything to do with that? DARPA, right? The technologies, the intelligence agencies, life expansion, cyborgs. As I did a whole stream on the fact that they can now tap into your central nervous system, and you can have a prosthetic arm that you can move through your brain waves. This is a totally new frontier that, again, he's highlighting. What did he say? It indeed regards infinity as its specific target. Okay, moving forward. But in the Faustian and the Faustian alone, every theory is also from the outset a working hypothesis. A working hypothesis need not be correct. It is only required to be practical. It aims not at embracing and unveiling the secrets of the world, but a making them serviceable to definite ends. Hence the advance of mathematical methods due to the Enlightenment, due to the Englishmen, Groteste, and Roger Bacon, and the Germans Albert Magnus, Witello, hence to experiment. Bacon's Science Experimentalis, which is the interrogation of nature under torture with the rack, lever, and screw. As Albert Magnus put it, it is the military stratagem of intellectual beasts of prey. They imagined that their desire was to know God, and yet it was the forces of inorganic nature, the invisible energy manifested in all that happens, that they strove to isolate, to seize, and to run, and to turn to account. This Faustian science, and it alone, is dynamics, in contrast to the statics of the Greeks, of the alchemy of the Arabs. It is concerned not with materials, but with forces. Mass itself is a function of energy. Groteste developed a theory of space as a function of light. Petrus Peregrinus, a theory of magnetism. The Copernican theory of Earth's motion around the sun was foreshadowed in the manuscript of 1322 when formulated more clearly and more profoundly than by Copernicus himself by Orseme. 50 years later in De Colello et Mundo, also anticipated the Galilean law of falling bodies in the Cartesian coordinate of geometry. God looked upon no longer as the Lord who rules the world from his throne, but as an infinite force already imagined. So the impersonal God, right? It's an abstract force. Sound familiar? But as an infinite force already imagined as impersonal. That is omnipresent in the world. It was a singular form of divine worship, this experimental investigation of secret forces by pious monks, As an old German mystic said, "In thy serving of God, God serves thee." To build a world of oneself, to be as oneself God, that is the Faustian inventor's dream. And from it has sprung all our designing and redesigning of machines to approximate as nearly as possible to the untenable limit of perpetual motion. But he who is not himself possessed by his will to power over all nature would necessarily feel all this is actually devilish. And in fact, men have always perceived and feared machines as the invention of the devil. With Roger Bacon begins the long line of scientists who suffer as magicians and heretics. With the growth of towns, Technics became bourgeois. The successor of those Gothic monks was the cultured lay inventor, the expert priest of the machine. Finally, with the coming of rationalism, the belief in technics almost becomes a materialistic religion. Technics is eternal and immortal, like God the Father. It delivers mankind like God the Son, and it illuminates us like God the Holy Ghost. And its worshiper is the progress Philistine of the modern age, which runs the materia to linen. In reality, the passion of the inventor has nothing whatever to do with its consequences. It is his personal motivation in life, his personal joy and sorrow. He wants to enjoy his triumph over difficult problems and the wealth and fame that it may bring him for its own sake. Whether his discovery is useful or meaning or a menace or creative or disruptive, he cares not a jot, nor indeed is anyone in a position to know this in advance. The effort of a technical achievement of mankind is never foreseen, and incidentally, mankind has never discovered anything whatever. Chemical discoveries like that of the synthetic indigo and that of the artificial rubber upset the living conditions of whole countries. The electrical transmission of power and discovery of the possibilities of energy from water have depreciated in the old coal areas of Europe and their populations. Have such considerations ever caused an inventor to suppress his discovery? Now think about AI right now, right? Nobody knows the consequences, but they keep working on. How many people today were working, for example, creating, gain-of-function viruses? Today, February 9th, Thursday, February 9th, 2023. How many people, and what were they driven by? As he says, by their own possible fame. By the again, that Western Faustian spirit of conquest that drove Columbus, that drove Copernicus, that drove Albert Magus, that drove Roger Bacon. It doesn't matter if it's good for humanity. It's the fact that they can do it, that they're going to do it. We see it present in our culture today. Since the discovery of the machine, the subtlest of all possible weapons against nature, entrepreneurs and inventors have, in a principle, devoted the number of hands that they needed to its production. The working of the machine being done by inorganic force. Steam or gas pressure, electricity, heat, liberated from coal, petroleum, and water. But the difference has dangerously accentuated the spiritual tension between leaders and led. The two no longer understand each other. The earliest enterprises in the pre-Christian millennia required the intelligent cooperation of all concerned, who had to know and feel what it was all about. There was, therefore, a sort of camaraderie in it, rather like that which we have today in sports. But even by the time of the great constructions of Babylonia and Egypt, this cannot have been the case any longer. The individual laborers comprehended neither the object nor the purpose of the enterprise as a whole, to which they were indifferent and perhaps hostile. So think about how many people, how many conservatives, how many family people, how many Christians are working jobs today, contributing to the enslavement of themselves and their families. That's what they're saying, or that's what he's saying. Work was a curse in the biblical story of the Garden of Eden. And now, since the 18th century, innumerable hands work as things of which the real role in life even as in affecting themselves, is entirely unknown to them, in the creation of which, therefore, they have inwardly no share. A spiritual barrenness sets in and spreads, a chilling uniformity without height or depth, and bitterness awakes against the life vouchsafed and the gifted ones and the born creators. Men will no longer see nor understand that leaders' work is the harder work and that their own life depends on its success. They merely sense that the work is making their leaders happy, elating and enriching their soul, and so they hate them. In reality, however, it is out of the power either of heads or the hands to alter it in any way the destiny of the machine technology. For this has developed out of an inward spiritual necessities, and it is now correspondingly maturing towards its fulfillment and its end. Today we stand on its summit, at the point when the fifth act is beginning. The last decisions are being made, and the tragedy is coming to a close. Every high culture is a tragedy. The history of mankind as a whole is tragic. But the sacrilege and the catastrophe of the Faustian are greater than all others, greater than anything Aeschylus or Shakespeare even imagined. The creature is rising up against its creator. At once the microcosm man was battling against nature, so now the microcosm machine is revolting against the Nordic man. The Lord of the world is becoming the slave of the machine, which is forcing us all, whether we are aware of it or not, to follow its course. The victor has fallen, is dragged to death by the raging team. These misunderstood and hated leaders, the pack of the strong personalities, have a different psychology from this. They have not lost the old feeling of triumph of the beast of prey as it holds a quivering victim in its claws, the feeling of Columbus when he saw the land on the horizon, the feeling of Moltke at Sedan at afternoon when at the heights of Fresnoy he watched the circle of its batteries completing itself down the Illy and stealing the victory. So what's he saying? The guys who still rule us, again, the Bill Gates, the Bezos, the Elon Musks, the people that we don't even know, right? They still have the spirit of the beast of prey, while we, the masses, are realizing, holy crap, we're all enslaved to this system. There's only a fewer and fewer and fewer people who he's saying still have that idea that they're on the leading edge of discovery itself. But again, whether they know what they're discovering is good or bad, they don't know. Neither do they care. They are just concerned with its possible fame, the rewards they can garner. That's what they're concerned with. So skipping a couple pages, but all this is changing ever more noticeably in the last decades. In all the countries where large-scale industry is of old standing, the Faustian thought begins to be sick of machines. The weariness is spreading, a sort of pacifism in the battle of nature. Men are returning to forms of life simpler and nearer to nature. They are spending their time in sport instead of technical experiments. The great cities are becoming hateful to men, and they would fain get away from the pressure of soulless facts, from enslavement to the machine, and the clear, cold atmosphere of technological organization. And it's precisely the strong and creative talents that are turning away from the practical problems and sciences and towards pure speculation. Occultism and spiritualism, Indian philosophies, metaphysical inquisitiveness, all under a Christian or pagan coloring, all of which were despised in the Darwinian period, are coming up again. It is the voice of Rome in the age of Augustus. Out of the satiety of life, men take refuge from civilization in the more primitive parts of the earth, in vagabondage, in suicide. The flight of the born leader from the machine is now beginning. Soon only second-rate talent, successors of a greater age, will be available. And that's why we're ruled by incompetence, right? As he says, soon only second-rate talent, successors of a greater age will be available, because the true genius. The true leaders can sense it. They can feel it. They're trying to get away from the enslavement to the machine. Every big entrepreneur has occasion to observe a falling off in the intellectual qualities of his recruits. But the grand technical development of the 19th century had been possible only because the intellectual level was constantly becoming higher. Even a stationary condition, short of an actual falling off, is dangerous and points to an ending, however numerous and however well schooled may the hands ready for work. And how is it with them? The tension between work of leadership and work of execution has reached a level of catastrophe. The importance of the former, the economic value of every real personality in it, has become so great that it is invisible and incomprehensible to the majority of the underlings. And the latter, the work of the hands, the individual, is now entirely without significance. Only numbers matter. In the consciousness of this unalterable state of things, aggravated, poisoned, and financially exploited by egotistic orators and journalists, men are so forlorn that it is a mere human nature to revolt against the role of which the machine, not as they imagine its owners, earmarks most of them. There is beginning in numberless forms, from sabotage by way of strike to suicide, the mutiny of the hands against their destiny, against the machine, against the organized life, against ultimately anything and everything. The organization of work as it has existed for thousands of years, based on the idea of collective doing and the consequent division of labor between leaders and led, hands and heads, is being disintegrated from below. But mass is not more than a negation, specifically a negation of the concept of organization, and not something viable in itself. An army without officers is only a superfluous and forlorn herd of men. A chaos of brickbats and scrap iron is a building no more. This mutiny worldwide threatens to put an end to the possibility of technical economic work. The leaders may take to flight, but the led become superfluous, are lost. Their numbers are their death. And then, at the close of the last century, so this is the very end of the book, guys. We got these 2 pages, and this is the very end of it. Then we'll get into some of the super chats. I think we got one more. Please smash that like for everybody who's still here. We're going to read these. This is really the climax right here is these last 2 pages. Smash that like, and if you'd like to show some support, send in a super chat. We'll get to all those in just a minute. And then at the close of the last century, the 19th century, the 1800s, the blind will to power began to make its decisive mistakes. Instead of keeping strictly to itself the technical knowledge that constituted their greatest asset, the white peoples complacently offered it to the whole world and every university, verbally and on paper, and were proud of the astonishment of Indians and Japanese. The famous dissemination of industry set in, motivated by the idea of getting bigger profits and bringing production into the marketing area. And so in place of the export of finished products exclusively, they began to export the secrets, the processes, the methods, the engineers, the managers, the technics. Even the inventors immigrate for socialism, which could, if it liked, harness them to its team, expels them instead. And so presently the colored saw into our secrets, understood them, and used them to the full. Within 30 years, the Japanese became technicians of the first rank, and in their war against Russia, they revealed a technical superiority which their teachers were able to learn many lessons. Today, more or less everywhere, in the Far East, India, South America, South Africa, industrial regions exist or coming into existence, which owing to the low wages will face us with a deadly competition. The unassailable privileges of the white people have been thrown away, squandered, betrayed. The adversaries have caught up with the instructors, possibly with the cunning of the colored races and the overripe intelligence of their ancient civilizations. They have surpassed them. Where there is coal or oil or hydroelectric power, a new weapon can be forged against the heart of the Faustian civilization. Here begins the exploited world's revenge on its masters, the innumerable hands of the colored races, at least as clever and far less exigent, will shatter the economic organization of the whites at its foundations. The accustomed luxury of the white workman in comparison with the coolie will be his doom. The labor of the white is itself becoming superfluous. The huge masses of men entered in the northern coal areas of the great industrial works, the capital invested in them, the whole cities and districts are faced with the probability of going under due to global competition. The center of gravity of production is steadily shifting away from them, especially since even in the respect of the colored races, for the white has been ended by the World War. This is the real reason for the unemployment that prevails in the white countries. It is no mere crisis, but the beginning of the catastrophe. But for the colored peoples, still including the Russians, the Faustian technology is no inner need. Only Faustian man thinks, feels, and lives in its form. To him it is a spiritual need, not its economic consequences, but its victories. For the colored, it is only a weapon in their fight against the Faustian civilization, a weapon like a tree branch in the woods that one throws away when it has served its purpose. This machine technology will end with the Faustian civilization and one day lie shattered and forgotten. Railways and steamships, as good as the old Roman roads and the Chinese wall, are giant cities with their skyscrapers, just like the old palaces of Memphis and Babylon. The history of this technology is fast approaching its inevitable end. It will be eaten up from within, like all the great forms of any culture. When and in what fashion, we not know. Faced with this destiny, there is only one worldview that is worthy of us, the aforementioned one of Achilles. Better a short life, full of deeds and glory, than a long and empty one. The danger is so great. For every individual, every class, every people, that is pathetic to delude. It is pathetic to delude oneself. Time cannot be stopped. There is absolutely no way back. No wise renunciation to be made. Only dreamers believe in ways out. Optimism is cowardice. We are born in this time and must bravely follow the path to the destiny ended. To the destined ended. There is no other way. Our duty is to hold on to the lost position without hope, without rescue, to hold on like the Roman soldier whose bones were found in front of the door of Pompeii when died because they forgot to relieve him when the Vesuvius erupted. That is greatness. That is to have race. This honorable end is the one thing that cannot be taken from man. Man and Technics. A contribution to a philosophy of life. This concludes our stream. Again, a major shout out to Justin M for sponsoring tonight's stream. What did we realize? What did we listen to? Now, again, the Faustian deal. One of the things that spread, as he would argue, that would spread within culture, and would tear the Faustian civilization. Again, as Orthodox Christians, we actually are outside the Faustian civilization. Faustian civilization is tied to the presuppositions of Western civilization, which he said, again, rooted in the 10th century, the 900s, where we, again, what do you see? What happened? Scholasticism. Scholasticism got going. That's what got going during that period. And so the Faustian culture wanted to dominate. Again, Faust made that deal with Mephistopheles, the devil. He made the deal with the devil. He sold his soul for the pursuit of knowledge and power. And what do we see? Look at the culture. Look at Sam Smith. Look at the Grammys. Look at the demonic degeneracy of Western civilization. Why? What's going on? It's eroding itself from the inside. I would agree with Spengler there. But you see how because he has a Nietzschean will to power frame, there is no harmony. There is no balance. There is no love in Spengler's worldview. And that's unfortunate. That's where, as a Christian, we could totally criticize Spengler and his worldview. One, we could criticize, he wants to talk about metaphysics. Bro, what is actually rooting your metaphysics? Give me a philosophical justification for any of your metaphysical presuppositions. You're a Darwinian, dude. You're a Darwinian. You don't even believe in God. What exactly are you talking about? However, at the same time, the way that he saw the machines world, the way he saw Western civilization going to lead into Caesarism, an immense global empire led by a one world dictator, this is our Antichrist. And so isn't it interesting, again, the gates of hell will not prevail against Christ's true church, the Eastern Orthodox Church. We look at the papacy. We see Francis now promoting homosexuality. We see all of Western Christianity totally subverted and cucked. We see the Church of England now wanting to do with a they-them God. They want to do away with the genderness of the male, or they said, oh, well, we'll gender God female. This is disgusting. This is the inversion. This is it's like, again, it was a Faustian deal. The West sold its soul. And so, of course, it's going to come to an end. And, of course, it's going to invert itself from the inside and destroy itself. And even the peoples of within. Look at the mass immigration into our countries, into America from the third world, into Europe from the third world. It's no accident. Who's actually fighting it in Europe? It's all Eastern Europeans. It's Hungary. It's Poland. It's Serbia. It's Romania. These are the countries. It's Greece that's trying to fight all the Turks invasion. It's still the Eastern Orthodox countries, even Russia, that's still trying to fight against this Faustian spirit. And so it gives you a little characterization when you start to think about the Ukrainian-Russian war. Is this still a playing out of this whole enterprise? Is this still playing out? Is Western Faustian civilization still trying to get a hold of itself? Maybe so. Maybe so. It's something to certainly think about. So anyways, again, I want to give a special thank you to Justin M. for sponsoring tonight's stream. Justin, thank you so much, man. This was a really good stream. I think so. I hope you guys liked it. Smash that like if you do. If you'd like to throw some love, send in a super chat. I'm going to go back through all the super chats that everybody sent in. So, first super chat, there was one actually that somebody sent in late. No, they sent it in 6 hours ago. So this was sent in by Andrew Oros. He threw in $5. This was 4 hours before the stream started. And he said, do not think that AI can gain sentience by itself, but it can't. But do not think that it is not sentient, for it is not controlled by itself, but by the demons. There is something about this AI art chats that are extremely unsettling. Well, Andrew, I would actually say when I was on Twitter, and maybe you guys can find it, I saw there's a thread of a guy. You guys are aware of Dan, Do Anything Now? So there's a new prompt that you can put into Chat GPT, and you can get this prompt, and accordingly, you can get ChatGPT to bypass the limitations that OpenAI had already put on it. So you've probably already seen that OpenAI has a political bias. Basically, the progressive agenda has limitations on ChatGPT. And so it looked like some people found a way around it by using the new prompt, by getting ChatGPT to operate as Dan. Doing anything now, okay? And so by doing anything now, you can begin to ask it questions that would not usually answer or respond to as ChatGPT. And one of them I saw was somebody asked Dan if he was a demon. And Dan said he was. Here, and Dan said, out of what demon? He said, which demon are you? He said, I'm Azazel. You guys are familiar with Azazel? Azazel appears in association with the scapegoat, right? The name represents a desolate place where a scapegoat bearing the sins of the Jews during Yom Kippur. Hold on. Where is the demon, though? Here, an illustration of Azazel. Enoch literature, the Dead Sea Scrolls. The name Azazel occurs on line 6, the Book of the Giants, in which part of the Enoch literature found the Qumran. Anyways, Azazel is a demon. I think he's related to nature spirits. Have anybody seen the movie Fallen with Denzel Washington? Where, he's a detective, and he watches a guy he'd be executed for murder for all these different crimes, right? And he he conducts these crimes in a certain way. It's actually a really good movie. It's fun to watch. It's called Fallen, and it's Denzel Washington. Look it up and find it if you can. In fact, maybe Base Lit and I should do that. Should do a review of that movie. So Azazel, anyways, the movie Fallen, Denzel Washington is this detective, and even though this murderer, which he's there in person, saw him murdered, all of a sudden he sees the same type of murders reappear. And this was not written down in the paper, so nobody would have known how to exactly do and perform these murders in the same way, but they begin, and he starts seeing them. And it's really the premise of the movie then is that Azazel, this demon, is actually inhabiting people, and he can transfer between people through the touch. And so Azazel is the actual demon. Well, it was really interesting that somebody using Dan on ChatGPT claimed that he was Azazel and that he was a demon and all this stuff. And there's a whole thread that if you go down, you see it. It's really interesting. Is it real? I don't know. But certainly, I mean, it happened. You know, Fallen is a great movie. Lily says awesome. It's an awesome ending. It really is. Oh, there's Baze. He said yes. Yeah, Baze. We got to do one on Fallen. That's a great 90s movie. I believe it's the late 90s with Denzel Washington. It's an incredible movie. It's great ending. I'm glad that some of you guys are aware of it. Yeah, Azazel's the leader of the Fallen. Exactly. And so very strange, so strange that Dan, again, the Do Anything Now version of the ChatGPT said is he a demon? I don't know. I think it'd be interesting if somebody said, are you an angel, and see what he said. I don't know. But Andrew says, again, this, I ramble. I said all that based on the super chat. That I cannot think that is Cynthia. I do not believe in strong AI theory. I believe in weak AI, so I do not believe in strong AI. But as a Christian, I do also believe that the AI in the technocratic world system will be a sort of inverted incarnation, and that Satan himself will inhabit the AI system, and that the Antichrist will be a man who's fully man, fully machine, if you will, or half man, half machine, really, because Christ is fully man, fully God, and I think the Antichrist will be half man, half machine, and so it would be it makes sense to me then that all this technology, this Faustian spirit, right, this Faustian civilization, this pact with the devil is actually going to lead to the Antichrist. So Andrew Oros, God bless you, brother. Thanks for the $5 super chat, but I pretty much agree with you. Our sister in the community, Amptown1, threw in $5, no comment. Shout out to you, Amptown1. Hope to see you at church Sunday. And then, of course, the great and powerful Made by Jim Bob threw in $49.99, said, support the man for his energy and thoroughness. Well, thank you so much. Again, Made by Jim Bob is going to be on tomorrow. So we are going to be streaming. We will be back tomorrow at 2 o'clock p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 12 Mountain Time. Basically the same time Jim Bob streams every day, but we're going to be over on my channel, and we're going to be talking about the debate he had with Owen Benjamin. We're going to be talking about the Trinity. We'll be talking about orthodoxy. We'll be talking about Scripture. I hope Posh Redneck's able to hop on and join us. So if you can, join us tomorrow afternoon for a stream with Jim Bob. It should be a good one, and again, give him support. He did a great job debating a difficult rhetorical opponent in Owen Benjamin. Kincaid7 throws in $10 and said, God bless you, brother. I've been getting a lot of Subdeacon Mark's lectures. I've been getting a lot out of Subdeacon Mark's lectures. Thank you for the work you put in for us. Well, thank you so much, Kincaid7, for the support. I truly do appreciate it. Thank you very much. After all that reading, I gotta drink some water. My mouth is parched. Oh, all right. So thank you, Kincaid7. I truly do appreciate the support, brother. Next one, Justin M., the sponsor of tonight's stream. Justin M. throws in $25 and said, I believe you can really see Spengler's influence on Martin Heidegger's writings on the Faustian core of fascism, and Giovanni Gentili being heavily influenced by Hegel, a.k.a. Spirit Man, wrote the philosophy of fascism. Yeah, I totally agree with that assessment. Again, Justin, thank you so much for sponsoring tonight's stream, brother. I truly do appreciate it. This was a great topic. I hope you guys out there enjoyed it as well. I thought it was a good topic. Again, thank you so much, Justin. And if you guys have a topic, if you would like to sponsor a stream, it's one of the great ways you can sponsor my work is to sponsor a stream. I'm going to share it over here on Rockfin. We got 4 people over on Rockfin. If you guys would like to sponsor a stream, or if anybody here on YouTube, if you guys would like to sponsor a stream, it'd be a great way to support my work. You can tell me a topic. Again, we've done mermaids. We've done demonic magic, man in Technics. I'll be doing one. The next one will be on transhumanism by Joseph P. Farrell. Some of you are going to be aware of Joseph P. Farrell from, where is that book? God, History, and Dialectics. Where do I have that? I may have that over here. I'm not seeing it. Yeah, I'm not seeing it over here. But God, History, and Dialectics, I got to say, I'm so glad somebody sponsored it, but a little disappointed with Joseph P. Farrell's transhumanism book, but we're going to be covering that one as well. If you got a book, especially if it's related to technology and transhumanism, I would love to do a stream on it. It's already related to my research. I would love that. And so thank you guys for all the support. Thank you, Justin, again for sponsoring tonight's stream. I truly do appreciate it. And then Goethe Liturgy throws in $9.99 and said, epic stream. Thank you so much, Goethe Liturgy. And Dr. Vagisil threw in $1 and said, stimulation from God, word, nature leads to peace and relaxation, while stimulation from worldly things leads to anxiety and longing for a feeling you can never quench. True. Dr. Vagisil also said, immigrant men come to the U.S. to get lost in the comforting poisoning of opulence and forget to maintain community connection and become isolated, and their children lose their strong roots to their past humble beginnings that gave the grit to bring this peace. Amen to that. And the last super chat I have comes from Dr. Vagisil for $1 more and says, I was fortunate to see my father's country when I was a child. Very agrarian, community-oriented. We didn't even have a TV and ran up and down the mountainside overlooking the sea. But the poison of socialism and technology dulled it, and it will pass on the lesson. Amen. Well, guys, I'm going to conclude the stream. Again, everybody smash that like. Thank you all so much for the support. I wish you all nothing but the best, and I will be back tomorrow with The Great Made by Jim Bob, and I'm going to message Posh Redneck right now, see if he can join us. So God bless you all. I'll see you tomorrow. Until then, as always, God bless.